Journey to Ellis Island, How My Father Came to America by Carol Bierman with Barbara Hefner, illustrated by Laura McGaw. For Julius Johanna Weinstein and all the other children who passed through Ellis Island on their way to the New World. Boarding ship Rotterdam, September 1922. Your name, please. The ship's purser glanced from his papers at the woman standing before him. He looked very important in his stiff blue uniform. Rachel Weinstein, and these are my children, Johanna and Esther, she answered, pointing at each of them. 11-year-old Johanna craned his neck to see through the crowds of people and piles of belongings on the ship's deck. He shifted the heavy brass samovar in his left arm impatiently. He had never seen such a huge ship before, and he could hardly wait to explore it. But his sister, Esther, who was only 7, clung tightly to his mother's hand. They were finally on the last leg of their journey to America. Johanna's mother answered all the purser's questions, including whether she could read and write. Yes, I read and write Yiddish, she answered proudly. Suddenly the purser focused on Johanna's right hand, which was wrapped in a sling. How did the boy lose his finger, he asked. Rachel gave Johanna a sharp look and drew him toward her. He had an accident. It was 4 years ago. He's fine now, she answered quickly. The purser scribbled busily with his pen and waved them on. Rachel breathed a sigh of relief. The Weinsteins found their way to a tiny windowless cabin in the lower decks of the ship. This would be their home for the next 9 days as they sailed from Rotterdam to New York. Johanna, relieved of carrying the bulky samovar, spent the afternoon running up stairways and exploring upper decks. Several times he almost got lost. The ship was so large. He even explored the areas of the ship reserved for the first-class passengers. Peeking into one of the staterooms, he saw thick carpets and quilted bedspreads. Their own cabin seemed very bare and small by comparison. When Johanna finally climbed out onto the top deck, he saw the ship's lifeboats and gulped in fresh air. The top picture shows all the people crowded, third-class passengers crowded, bound for the America. And in the bottom one, you see that they have plenty of lifeboats in case of an accident at sea. Meals were served to third-class passengers in a dining room filled with long wooden tables. Bustling stewards placed platters from the middle of each table, and people had to serve themselves. Dinner that night and every night afterwards was boiled potatoes and herring. Johanna hated herring, but he leaned in and spooned up big platefuls of potatoes for himself. Rachel, busy chatting to other passengers, didn't realize that Esther was too small to reach the platters. Her plate was empty, and there were tears in her eyes when all the food was gone. Don't worry, Johanna said. I've got enough for both of us. But he was relieved when seconds were served and he was able to fill his plate again. That night, no one could sleep inside the tiny cabin. The rolling of the ship as it moved through the waves made Esther horribly seasick. And once the lights were out, they all heard strange rustling and scratching sounds. Rats, yelled Johanna as 2 brown furry creatures scurried across the cabin floor. Esther shrieked and crawled into bed with her mother. Johanna curled into a tight ball and covered his head with the blanket. Over the next few days, Johanna got to know the ship's crew. They offered to show him the wheelhouse. For a minute, he held the ship's huge wooden wheel and admired the gleaming brass around the compass. It was also a thrill to meet the captain. Johanna made friends with some of the other children who were traveling to America in the lower decks of the ship. One little boy asked why his arm was in a sling. I lost my finger, Johanna replied. The doctor said I should move my arm, but can you keep shouldn't move my arm, but can you keep a secret? His new friend nodded vigorously. Sometimes I take it out of the sling and use it just a little. They both laughed. Then the younger boy looked worried. What if they don't let you come to America? My uncle says don't take sick people who are sick. I'm not sick, and my mother will fight for me. She won't let them take me back, proclaimed Johanna. Soon Rachel would be put to the test. As the huge ship pulled into New York Harbor, Rachel, Johanna, and Esther quickly gathered their belongings. Then the family stood at the ship's rail. Looming ahead of them was a giant green statue, a woman holding a flaming torch in the air, and beyond lay the vast city. Sunlight danced off the windows of the tall buildings. So this was America, Johanna thought to himself. But Rachel rubbed her palms together nervously. She noticed that inspectors had already arrived on the ship. They were directing most of the third-class passengers onto ferries, but they were turning a few away. She knew that the ferries were bound for Ellis Island, where the people would be given medical inspections and questioned before entering the United States. Would they let Johanna in? Rachel and the children waited their turn in line. When the inspectors saw Johanna, they shook their heads. They would not let him board the ferry, and they told the captain that he would have to return the boy to Russia. Rachel began to cry, pulling Johanna toward her. Esther burst into tears as well. Johanna was bewildered. Why couldn't they see how healthy he was? The arm was nothing. It would not stop him from being a good American. Surely his mother would be able to make them change their minds. They had been through too much to stop now. Before the voyage, Russia, 1916. And this is a picture of Johanna and Esther and their mother right before. Johanna could remember what it was like before the war came. Each summer, he and his mother, his older sister Mendel, and his baby sister Esther would leave their home in Pinsk for the village of Porosets. There, his mother was the estate manager for a huge poppy farm. On long summer days, Johanna played on the riverbanks with other children. "Don't go too far, Yodel," Mendel would beg when he waded into the river. "Mama said to stay on the bank." Johanna had a grown-up brother who had gone to America before he was born. America was also where Johanna's father had lived before he had returned home and been ordered into the Russian army. Johanna remembered his father scooping up in his arms. He remembered the scratchy feeling of his father's face and beard pressed against his face. "You must be immense while I'm gone, Johanna. Take care of your little sister and don't make trouble for Mama and Mendel. When I come back, we're going to all go to see your big brother in America." Johanna's father never returned. And soon the war came to Pogorowitz. Johanna remembered the Russian soldiers arriving first. He had never seen grown men look so dirty and exhausted. The German army was right behind them. They turned their big guns on Pogorowitz, and thundering explosions shook the village. Mendel was badly wounded. A piece of shrapnel had hit her in the head. Rachel put her in a wagon and drove off after the retreating Russian army, hoping to find a doctor. Just after Rachel crossed the bridge leaving the village, the Germans blew it up. Johanna and Esther had been left behind in the care of the mayor of Pogorowitz, but the shelling from the guns was so heavy there was no safe place to hide. The mayor told Johanna to take his sister and follow his mother. Johanna went down to the riverbank and put 2-year-old Esther on his back. He had never swum the river before, but he knew that it was shallow and slow-moving. Struggling and splashing, he made it to the other side, and with Esther's little arms tied around his neck. After a long, tiring walk, the two big, draggled children found their mother in the next town. She was mourning for Mendel, who had died from her wounds. Johanna and Esther cried for their lost sister, while Rachel hugged them fiercely. "From now on, whatever happens, we will never be separated again," she vowed. "No matter how long it takes us, we're going to America." And so Rachel and her two children set out for their home in Pinsk, where they could pack up their few belongings. But all of Russia was in a turmoil, and it was hard to find a safe route. Once the family was caught in the middle of a battle, with soldiers shooting all around them before they could take cover. A stray bullet hit Johanna's right hand and tore off the top of his ring finger. A soldier wrapped Johanna's hand in a bandage. Rachel made him a rough sling from a long-sleeve shirt, and then they kept moving because it was too dangerous to stop. Rachel was desperate to get help for her injured son. She decided that despite the dangers, they must make their way to Kiev, where she had a cousin who was a doctor. Yohada's days became feverish blur. He plodded along, sometimes splashing through mud and snow, and sometimes kicking up dust that made his throat burn. His arm felt like a big hot drum that pounded out a heavy beat with every step he took. He begged his mother to let him lie down beside the road, but Rachel said, "If you stop, we must all stop. But if you walk, every step will take you closer to the doctor who can make you well again. And when you're strong, we will go to America." And after that, the drum still throbbed through his whole body, but now was thumping out a beat that carried him on. "We are going to America, going to America." It took them more than a month to reach Kiev. By this time, Yohada's whole arm was so infected that the doctor thought it should be removed. Rachel begged him, "Please, he's just a little boy. He needs his arm. I know you can save it." So the doctor removed only what was left of the injured finger and cleaned out all the infection. He put the arm in a black rubber cast and sling and told Yohada not to use it. After that, Yohada's hand began to heal, and the family continued their journey to Minsk. Yohada became skilled at using his left arm for everything. It was his job to carry the brass samovar that they managed to bring with them all the way from Pokrovets. But there were other dangers in their paths. Within 2 nights of their arrival in Minsk, Rachel heard that the pogrom thugs who attacked Jewish people were coming. Rachel dragged Yohada and Esther from their beds, and they ran to an abandoned monastery on the edge of town. They dug frantically in the earth beside the monastery fence until there was enough room to squeeze underneath. Then they hid in the tall grass. Yohada and Esther were shaking and whimpering with fear. Rachel whispered to them, "It's all right now, we're safe. The pogrom won't find you here. Just go to sleep." Yohada and Esther were so exhausted they did sleep. But Rachel stayed awake, and from her hiding place she could see homes set on fire and helpless people murdered. When Yohada woke up in the morning, it was quiet. Then he looked at his mother. "Mama, your hair is all white," he said in a frightened voice. Indeed, Rachel's hair was now completely white from the shock of what she had seen. "Yohada," she said quietly, "even when we're safe in America, never ask me what I saw here." The war and horrors finally came to an end. Rachel and Yohada made their way to relatives in Poland. Then they waited for Abe to send them money for tickets. Finally, Yohada could go to school, but when he came home, his first question was always, "Did we hear from Abe?" One day, Rachel and Esther greeted him at the door with, "Yes, yes!" Rachel exclaimed, her cheeks flushed with excitement and her eyes sparkling. "The money from Abe arrived today." Esther grabbed her brother's good arm and danced around a circle, singing, "We're going to America! We're going to America!" And so once again, the family continued their journey, now toward Rotterdam in Holland, where they could board a ship bound for the Golden Land. Please let us stay. The Rotterdam, September 1922. Now, the last of the ferries carried passengers to Ellis Island was pulling away from the Rotterdam, but the Weinsteins had not been allowed to leave the ship. Yohada and Esther had never seen their mother so upset. She has always been the one to calm their fears and comfort them, but now tears streamed down her face. "Please, he's just a little boy, a good boy," she begged the captain. "If they send him back, he will die. There's no one to take care of him there. If he has to go back, we must all go back. Please help us." The captain of the Rotterdam could understand why Rachel was so desperate. He had seen it before, people who made the long journey to America, only be told they were too sick or weak to stay. He was a kind man who had taken a liking to this little family. He also knew that his shipping company would have to pay the cost of returning the Weinsteins to Russia if they were not allowed into the country. "Please calm yourself," he said to Rachel. "I will see what I can do and see if there is something that can be done." The captain strode over to the inspectors and spoke earnestly to them. "Have another look at this young boy. He's not sickly. In fact, he's been all over the ship exploring while everyone else was seasick and stayed below. The inspectors agreed to let the family go ashore so that Yohada could be checked by the doctors. The next morning, they all boarded a ferry to Ellis Island. Rachel, Yohada, and Esther were taken to a long building on the far side of the island to spend the night. Inside was a narrow room filled with metal beds lined up in 2 rows. Each bed had a mattress with a folded blanket and a pillow placed neatly on top of it. "Esther, look at all these pillows," cried Yohada with glee. Rachel perched carefully on the edge of the bed. "Mama," Esther asked in a small voice, "can we have some pillows to sleep with?" "I'm sure they'll be fine," Rachel said, giving her daughter a hug. Yohada and Esther ran from bed to bed, gathering their treasure. When Esther had filled her chosen bed with pillows, she plopped down on top and snuggled in blissfully. Since it was Friday, Rachel began to prepare for the family's first Sabbath in America. She unpacked her precious candlesticks and 2 Shabbos candles, but she couldn't find any matches. She turned to Yohada. "Please run to those workmen we saw outside and ask them for a match. You must say match in English like your father taught you. Now go." Yohada ran off to find the workmen. He stood for a moment watching them. Then one of them looked up and he yelled, "Match, match!" But what Yohada said sounded more like, "Match, match!" The men looked at each other and shrugged. "What do you want, kid?" one of them shouted. Yohada knew he'd have to try something else. He pretended to hold a match and strike it on his shoe. Then he lit an imaginary candle and blew the match out. "Matches! The kid wants matches," one of the men said, laughing. The men rummaged in their pockets. Soon they were tossing matches to Yohada as fast as he could catch them in his good hand. He grinned and bowed to thank them, then ran back to his mother with his prize. "Look, Mama, I can speak English. The men understood me." That evening the children watched as Rachel lit the candles and said the Hebrew blessing. Then she added a few more words in Yiddish. "Dear God, please make them let us stay. We have journeyed and wandered too long." Twice Around the Island, Ellis Island, September 1922. On Saturday morning, Rachel laid out her children's cleanest clothes. She braided Esther's hair and helped Yohada button his shirt. Then they waited nervously for the medical inspector. It seemed a very long time until the boat arrived carrying the 3 men in uniforms. One of them spoke a little Yiddish. He explained that they were doctors from the immigration service. The youngest doctor pointed to Yohada's shirt and motioned for him to take it off. Yohada was good at unbuttoning his shirt with one hand, but his fingers were shaking this morning. All his ribs showed through his skin. Would the doctor send him back for being too skinny? He stuck out his chest and tried to look as strong as possible. The doctors used a stethoscope to listen to Yohada's heart and lungs. Then the other doctor removed the black rubber cast from his arm. They gently moved his arm in different directions, murmuring to each other in English. Suddenly, the third doctor said, "Can you run around the island?" He pointed to the door and made a circular motion with his hand. The doctor who spoke Yiddish started to explain, but Yohada had already understood. Yeah, he said excitedly. He knew he was a good runner. Yohada bolted out of the door and set off on the path that followed the shoreline. As he ran, he gazed at the gray-green water stretching far into the distance. He could see the statue of the woman with the torch. He passed the workmen who had given him the matches the day before and waved to them. He rounded the corner, heading toward the vast city across the harbor. Soon he was back, hardly panting at all. Rachel, Esther, and the doctors were waiting for him. Yohada hoped this was the end of the testing. Then the young doctor took a rubber ball out of his pocket. He threw it against the wall a couple times and caught it. He turned to Yohada. "Can you do that with your right hand?" he asked. Yohada smiled to show that he understood and reached for the ball. But Esther exclaimed, No! The doctors looked confused. The one who had spoke some Yiddish tried to explain to Rachel, "We think that his arm needs exercise to make it strong again. We'd like to see how well he can exercise it." and how he can use it. But Rachel continued to shake her head. Yohada thought he knew why his mom was refusing. It's all right, Mom, I can do it. I've been using my arm a lot, he said. But Rachel took the ball from his hand and thrust it behind her back. Now the doctors were frowning. The one who had spoken to Rachel made one more effort. Mama, he said in a baffled tone, don't you want your son to stay in America? Yeah, she explained earnestly. But then why can't he play ball, said the doctor. Rachel's words came out in a rush. Because it's a Sabbath and we do not play ball on the Sabbath. The doctor laughed in relief and explained the others. Well, my friend, said the young doctor, do you think you can run around the island one more time? He made the circular motion with his hands. Yohada was off. This time he didn't look around, didn't wave to anyone. He kept his eyes on the gravel path and concentrated on not tripping. He pumped his arms and lengthened his strides. Halfway around, Yohada's heart began to hammer in his chest. The feeling reminded him of running in terror to the river and swimming across with Esther on his back. It reminded him of running to hide at the monastery and running across the battlefield and getting shot. It reminded him of his infected arm pounding like a drum. Going to America, going to America. Well, now he was in America and he was going to run so fast that they would have to let him stay. He could see everyone waiting for him. Esther was jumping up and down with excitement. The doctors had broad smiles on their faces. Yohada grinned as he put on a last burst of speed. Well, he certainly seems to be healthy enough to stay in the United States, said the doctor, who spoke Yiddish, and the others nodded. He turned to Rachel. His arm is just weak from lack of use. When it's not the Sabbath, he must play ball. It will not hurt him. It will make him better. Rachel's face lit up. Thank you, I understand, she said. She pulled her children to her and hugged them. I'm so proud of you, Yohada. Rachel was very happy, but she knew they were not yet free to leave the island. The final hurdle. Ellis Island, September 1922. The next morning, the Weinsteins were taken to the main building on Ellis Island. Yohada and Esther thought it looked like a castle with its massive red brick walls edged in white stone and its 4 tall towers. America must be a rich country if they have such a beautiful building just for people arriving, Yohada exclaimed. Rachel nodded, but she was too nervous to answer. They struggled up the staircase to the huge registry room with the bags that held everything they owned. Yohada was still lugging the samovar. He had never been in a room so large. There were rows and rows of wooden benches crowded with men, women, and children and their bundles of belongings. The hall was hot and stuffy, and it was echoed with noise, babies crying, people talking anxiously to each other in many different languages, and officials calling out names. The Weinsteins sat on a bench to wait. Esther curled up against Rachel and soon fell asleep. And this is the main registry room in Ellis Island. Yohada saw a man approaching with a big bucket filled with milk and a basket of long yellow fruit. He was stopping at every child, giving each one a cup of milk and one of the strange pieces of fruit. Yohada watched as one boy bit right into the yellow skin, made a face, and spit it out. Then he saw someone pull the skin down in strips and eat the soft white fruit inside. Yohada smiled to himself. Every day in America, he was learning something new. When the man reached Yohada, he gave him a banana and one to save for Esther. Yohada ate his banana hungrily and gulped down the warm milk, but he was still thirsty. He noticed the man with the bucket had moved on a few rows and was still giving out milk. Yohada quietly slipped away from his mother's side and took a seat in a row the man had not yet reached. When the man came to Yohada, he hardly glanced up, and the boy got another delicious drink of milk. Yohada moved on a few rows to try his luck again, but this time the man looked closely at him. Hey, wait a minute, didn't I give you some before? Yohada understood the man's tone of voice and shook his head nervously. Nah, he said. It was you, all right. The man wagged his finger at Yohada. You can't fool me, son. No more milk for you. Yohada returned to his mother's side with the milk and banana man's stern eyes watching him all the way. Where have you been? Rachel asked. Just wandering around, Yahada replied sheepishly. Stay here, his mother said firmly, pointing to the seat beside her. We don't know when Abe will come, and we don't want to miss him. Finally, they heard their name. Weinstein family, please, this way, please. They scrambled to their feet, grabbed their belongings, and hurried after an official-looking man. Then Rachel stopped so suddenly that Yahada and Esther almost collided with her. Avram, Rachel whispered softly. Yahada followed his mother's gaze to where a large group of people were waiting behind a barrier. She was staring at a young man who looked very much like she did. The young man hesitated for a second, and then he yelled, Mama, is it you? Esther, Yodel, I'm your brother Abe. Rachel couldn't speak. She started to cry. Mama, don't cry, Abe called. I'm here to take you home. The official hurried them on. Abe signaled to Rachel that he would join them. Yahada looked over his shoulder at Abe as they were hustled away. This was really the brother he had never seen before. He looked so American. The Weinsteins were herded into a room where three men sat at a large oak desk behind a wooden railing. Rachel approached the railing with her head held high and her arms around her children. Another man entered the room and explained to Rachel in Yiddish that this was the Board of Special Inquiry and that he would interpret for her. He explained that women were not allowed to leave Ellis Island unless they had escorts, such as a husband, father, uncle, or son to take care of them. My son has come for us. I saw him outside, Rachel replied, turning anxiously toward the door. Just then, Abe was brought in. The oldest of the men behind the desk looked up from his papers and spoke to Abe. Are you going to be responsible for this family? Abe replied. This is my mother, my brother, and my sister. I've waited a long time for them to come. His voice was clear and firm. I'm going to take care of them here in America. The man you need to post a bond with in order to take them with you. This means you must leave $500 with us to prove that they will not become a burden on American society. Do you understand? Again, the interpreter spoke quickly to Rachel. Yahada saw Abe's face turn pale. Abe paused for a moment and then said, Sir, I do not have $500 to pay the bond, but I do have a job, and I was in the American Army during the war. I know my responsibility to America, my country, my home. He pointed to his family. I will not let them become a burden on society. The men studied their papers. They spoke quietly together for a moment. Then the oldest man nodded his head. He looked at Abe sternly and said, I believe you, young man. You have promised before me that you will take care of your family, and that is what you must do. He quickly signed the release order and handed it to Abe. Then Abe turned to Rachel and said in Yiddish, Come, Mama, let's go home to Brooklyn. Rachel, Yahada, and Esther were giddy with happiness as they boarded the ferry from Ellis Island to the tip of Manhattan. Yahada couldn't stop looking at his grown-up brother. Abe looked just as nervous and excited as he was himself, but when Abe looked at his mother, a shadow passed over his face. How long has her hair been white like that? He asked Yahada quietly. Yahada started to explain, but then he thought about how much there was to tell. They would have plenty of time to talk. A long time, he whispered back. Abe sighed. Suddenly his eyes fell on the heavy brass samovar. Why are you still carrying that thing? Abe grinned and grabbed it from Yahada. You're in America now. We don't need this here. And with that, he threw the samovar overboard. Yahada quickly turned to his mother. Would she be angry? But Rachel started to laugh. Abe quickly held Esther up to the railing to watch the samovar sink, but only a few bubbles marked the spot where it had disappeared. Yahada smiled. How many times did he wish he could get rid of that samovar, and now it was gone, just as their old life of running in fear was gone. America's a wonderful place, he thought. The Golden Land, New York City, September 1922. Years later, Yahada remembered his first days in America as a confusing jumble of new experiences. He met his aunt and uncle who had taken Abe in when he first arrived. Now they made room for the three more Weinsteins. Abe was a salesman and had his own car. Yahada couldn't decide which was more amazing, riding around in comfort on the soft leather seats of Abe's Model T or looking out the window at the skyscrapers of New York. Even though Yohada was 12 years old, he had to start school in the first grade because he couldn't speak English. When his teacher asked him his name, he said Udall, his family nickname. The teacher wrinkled his nose and said, Udall, there's no name for an American boy. We'll call you Julius. From then on, Julius Weinstein was his English name. Julius learned English very quickly, and within 2 months he moved up to second grade. As his language skills improved, he skipped from grade to grade. Soon he was in the class with students his own age. Rachel, determined not to become a burden on her relatives, found an apartment for her family on the Lower East Side of New York. She opened a small restaurant and also took in boarders to help pay rent. By the time Julius reached high school, he realized his mother needed help to support the family. The school principal helped Julius arrange his schedule so he could take his most important subjects, including Latin and Spanish, in the mornings. He was then able to work in the afternoon. By the time Julius graduated from high school, he could speak 8 languages. And this is a picture of Rachel as she posed on Julius's wedding day, and years later with her granddaughter Carol, who's the author of this book. Even though Julius had to work from an early age, he was always grateful that he had been able to get through Ellis Island. It took a long time before he felt at home in America, but he knew that he would never have to run or hide from anyone again. Julius attended City College of New York at night while continuing to support Esther and his mother by working during the day. Later, he married and had 2 children, a boy and a girl. Julius and his wife, Marjorie, were married for more than 50 years. Esther also married and had 3 children. Rachel lived to be 89 years old and was strong and independent to the end of her life. That first picture is of Esther, the middle one is of Julius, and the last one is of Julius and his wife when they were married. Julius recently visited Ellis Island and sat in the registry room where he had waited 75 years before. Many of the buildings on Ellis Island have been restored and are now a museum. Julius is now in his late 80s and lives in Florida. He is also my father. Several times a year, he visits his children and grandchildren in New York. On the 75th anniversary of the run that won him entry into America, he returned to Ellis Island with me and visited the museum there. He looked around carefully and then said, it didn't look like this when I was here, but I still remember.